why don't we just get right into this? Now, you're listening to the show. I generally try to avoid delving into what might be described as conspiracy theories, folks. I kind of I did that rabbit hole a long time ago, and I'm not saying that, the government's telling us the truth about 9/11 or whatever, but I found that, a lot of these pursuits, it's you could just go down these things forever. They call it a rabbit hole for a reason. I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. There ain't no bottom to the damn thing, right? And so I try not to do that because I just feel like there's no limit to the amount of time that you can spend on it and never get anywhere, right? But in recent weeks, I've become convinced that there are far fewer accidents involved in our misfortune than I had previously assessed. How many people are acting with intentional malice versus how many are useful idiots versus how many are the useful idiots of those who so act is anybody's guess. But we certainly have a lot of stupid people in our midst who fall for ridiculous tricks. Yet, the presence of malevolent actors setting the stage for those tricks, I don't think is really up for reasonable debate anymore. Let's begin with a quick recap of the so-called alt-right optics debate. After the Unite the Right rally in 2017, a conflict ensued on the alt-right about how we presented ourselves to the public and how the media reflected that presentation. That was a conversation worth having, to be sure. The alt-right had previously existed as an internet phenomenon that served primarily to trigger leftists into hysterics. The left had been screaming about all manner of bigotry being pervasive throughout our politics for as long as I've been paying attention to such things, but actual incidences of such bias were few and far between. When Trump started gaining traction in the Republican primary and the alt-right meme machine started gaining steam, leftists finally had their boogeyman. The fabled Nazis who had haunted their nightmares were now tweeting at them and showing up in physical space. This served a very good purpose for the right and for Donald Trump. Leftists are absolutely disgusting excuses for human beings, but their crimes are usually paved over by media and government. They are presented as freedom fighters, relentlessly in pursuit of justice and peace. The worst thing that can happen to the left is for people to see them for what they are. As their paranoid delusions of racism were suddenly confirmed by the alt-right, their violence, deception, and general wickedness became more plain to see for the general public. Had the alt-right stuck to this format, we would have been a very useful tool for the Republican Party. Nobody wants to elect a party whose platform is based in hysterical paranoia and street crime. By triggering leftists and sending them out into the streets to proudly do violence in public, we expose them as a threat to the order and stability of the country. This, perhaps more than anything else, got Donald Trump elected and shifted the consciousness of the nation. Of course, we never set out to be the tools of the existing power structure. That inglorious existence describes the Antifa lowlives we helped to expose. We want to make a meaningful impact on the world around us, so we had to step out from behind our keyboards at some point. Unfortunately, these two roles were in conflict. You could be a Nazi LARPer troll on the internet and trigger leftists into behaving like savages, or you can try to participate in the mainstream political discourse. You cannot do both. Our attempt to blur the lines was bound to fail, and in hindsight, one is left to question if that was an accident. Driving the alt-right discourse to the furthest extremes was certainly a team effort, which I most enthusiastically participated in myself. However, even I was hesitant to adopt the explicit Nazi branding and found the praise of figures like Dylan Roof to be out of bounds. The people most responsible for driving things in that direction were the Daily Stormer and the host of the Daily Shoah. It thus came as quite the surprise to see these same figures attacking others over optics. Weave, the Jewish technical mind behind both sites, had appeared twice on the radical agenda, once to sing the praises of Dylan Roof and call for the extermination of most of the world's population. Another time he came on to discuss the domain-level censorship of the Daily Stormer and called for the slaughter of children in response to that censorship, which got me kicked off of GoDaddy.com for my domain registrar. The Daily Shoah literally means the Daily Holocaust. To hear them singing in unison about how everyone else needed to clean up their act was laughable. Moreover, there wasn't really a debate over the subject. The conflict was driven by personal attacks, silencing of opponents, and countless indicators of deception. There is a legitimate case to be made for polishing up one's public perception, but when it is made by liars who have zero intent on doing so themselves, the legitimacy is lost and no redemption of the public perception can ensue. A fracture thus took hold in the movement, from which another element emerged. We'll call them the Dylan Roof Fan Club to avoid giving them unwarranted promotion. They had little use for optics and wanted to push the most shocking content possible. For some, this was just edgy humor. For others, sincere belief, perhaps. For others still, I have become convinced this was subversive. They pushed the bowl cut memes, called for race war and violence against all who stood in our way. Everyone else was a cuck. They could afford to do this, of course, because they are anonymous and do not have to suffer the consequences of being held to account for their words. This is a classic example of subversion. Drive a wedge between factions of a movement and then play both sides of the conflict. Weave tells everybody to get off the streets and shut up and hide. The Dylan Roof fan club tells people to shoot up and work diligently to make society unlivable in hopes of fomenting race war. Neither one of these strategies had a snowball's chance in hell of positively influencing the direction of the country, and yet this was the dichotomy presented by the two sides of the alt-right optics debate. Are you a cuck or a terrorist? Choose one. Now, I can't prove that this is the work of Israeli intelligence or whatever, but I could hardly think of a better way to destroy the alt-right than to pit them against one another in this fashion. It likewise fit with several other senselessly divisive memes which began circulating throughout the movement. The Wignat slur became a tool of class division. White Sharia drove hostility towards women. Boomer jokes drove generational divisions. So here you have this ethnocentric movement trying to take on the most powerful people in the world, being divided along class, gender, and generational lines, and when that didn't render us completely neutral, nonsensical, ideological, and strategic conflicts were added to the fire. So one of two things is true. Either sincere people came up with a plan this stupid and predictably failed, or malicious actors who wanted us to fail gave this to us, and people were stupid enough to fall for it, myself included. Adding credibility to the conspiracy angle is the recent smear campaign against your humble correspondent. I won't spend much time today trying to win over my critics, but those who have been paying attention to the radical agenda for a while, and especially those who know me in real life, know that I am about the most sincere person that you could hope to come across. Anyone who paints me as a liar is doing so with either malice or profound ignorance. Every last bit of unflattering truth about me, which presently circulates, was put out there by yours truly. My flaws are too numerous to list, but perhaps my greatest one is being too honest. It is telling, indeed, that while I am guilty of so many actual imperfections, the people who attack me would rather tell lies, claiming that I've snitched on people for non-crimes I was wholly unaware of, or that I'm addicted to methamphetamine, or that I disclose customer data to the media or the government, or that I'm a homosexual, or whatever the fucking lie is today. The smear campaign waged against me by people who claim to be part of this movement makes the smear campaign the media waged against the kids from Covington Catholic School look responsible by comparison. I challenge anyone to make the case that any honest person could find merit in any of this. Now, I don't mean to make this about me, but it is telling to examine from that angle. What benefit could there be to destroying me or the radical agenda? Who would benefit from that? Now, one who is very concerned about optics might make the case that I should go away because my bombast is less than helpful to those trying to win elections. But the people who attack me are literally praising mass shooters and attacking the President of the United States. They tell people that we'd be better off with Democrats in control because Democrats will make life intolerable and trigger a martial conflict. They obviously aren't driven by legitimate concerns about public perception. Indeed, it might be more helpful to look at their attitudes towards the president and the Republican Party. I'm as disappointed as anyone with certain aspects of the Trump presidency, but I have a hard time taking people seriously when they suggest we would be better off in any conceivable way with Hillary Clinton in the White House. We might not have gotten a wall or meaningful immigration reform with the 2 years that Republicans held both houses of Congress and the White House, but we certainly aren't going to get anything positive with Democrats in control of the House of Representatives, which was the outcome these same people desired from the most recent federal election. Now you got a bunch of guys who mostly hide behind aliases, hoping that Trump and the Republicans lose in 2020. Some of them are straightforward enough to confess that their motive is the downfall of the country and the mass uncontrolled violence that would necessarily result. Of course, if you get a glimpse of any of these characters, you'll quickly come to realize that whatever conflict they might be cheering for from the sidelines, they obviously have no intent to fight it themselves, much less win. They want other people to do the fighting, and they want those people to lose. Of course, it's not enough to say that because some person or group wants violence that they are subversives. Perhaps a day arrives when all orderly means of conflict resolution have proven futile. Perhaps that day is closer than any of us would like to admit. So if one were to conclude that the time for armed struggle was upon us, well, how would one interested in success go about it. That's above my pay grade, sadly. But I can tell you what they wouldn't be doing. Screaming about it on YouTube and attacking everyone who doesn't join the party as a traitor to the revolution is not some sort of activity that a revolutionary would be participating in. Walking into houses of worship, gunning down non-combatants, and then waiting for the cops to capture or kill you is terribly unlikely to result in a desirable outcome, unless you're a lot of these guys would purport to be siege devotees, a book by James Mason, but perhaps they would do well to actually read the text. Here's a quote from it. No stunts, no handstands, no fanfare. Instead, care and caution. Long-range planning. When you strike, strike hard and strike deep. Play for keeps, but always, in the end, it's a matter of greater steady mileage over intense but short bursts. Don't attract needless attention. Another quote reads, if you can't do it, leave it alone. Forget it. Don't try and talk someone else into doing it, and especially don't hear of anyone else trying to talk you into anything. Don't talk, period. However, it can help to begin to learn now and to train and to have materials ready. But here you have a group of guys who do nothing but talk, and to make matters worse, their words are worthless because they lie worse than anyone stupid enough to follow them seriously will be anyone stupid enough to take them seriously will be lucky to find themselves doxxed and jobless and incapable of working toward positive change. Those less fortunate will find themselves dead or in prison and paraded around the cable news channels as the next excuse for state repression. A piece published yesterday in The Guardian by Vegas Tenold reads like a script from this act. Titled, The Neo-Nazi Plot Against America is Much Bigger Than We Realize, Tenold conjures the familiar lie that right-wing terrorism threatens to bring the nation to its knees using email drafts and drug charges against Lieutenant Chris Hassan of the U.S. Coast Guard as proof of the imminent threat. Hassan, you may recall, is currently being held without bail for being in possession of firearms and ammunition, while also in possession of illegal drugs. These charges would not have warranted his detention, but prosecutors used his Google search history and some notes fantasizing about political violence to claim Hassan was plotting mass murder. And he was thusly held without bail. I'll real quick add to this. I suspect, by the way, that this is a lot of the motivation for people running around telling people that I'm on fucking drugs, by the way. This Hassan guy, they have nothing on him, right? Like the damn, the guns that he got caught with are not a crime unless he's also in possession of drugs. The Google searches that he did are not crimes. The prosecutors just used them as a way to deny him bail when they came after him on this other charge. You're looking at me right now. If you're watching the video of this, you see I got guns on the desk, I have fucking ammunition all over the place. Well, you got a bunch of people running around screaming he's smoking meth. They'll fucking be liable to get a goddamn FBI to knock the goddamn door in here and do an inspection, right? I really think that that's a lot of what this is. If I remember correctly, I wasn't able to confirm this before the show. A guy, Jeffrey Clark, got arrested over in, I forget if it was D.C. or Maryland. His brother had, shot himself, blew his fucking brains out right after the Robert Bowers thing, and the family got concerned and alerted authorities, and they came and they took this guy in and, his Gab profile said something like, I'm a meth smoking, pipe bomb making, etc., which is it's a gag, right? It's the, what was the Reed Siege, burn your house down, move to Belize, something, meth is in there somewhere, some meme, right? It's a gag. But prosecutors fucking use that when they go and they indict this guy and they hold him without bail, right? Of course, if the neo-Nazi terror threat were really what were quite what Tenold et al. Would like to pretend it is, Hassan would be a non-story. A Coast Guard lieutenant with some notes and drugs would hardly warrant headlines while actual terrorism was actually happening. The fake pipe bombs of Caesar Sayak Jr., a Native American, would not be billed as white supremacist terrorism if there was actually an abundance of whites committing terrorism. Tenold quotes Keegan Hanks, a researcher at the Southern Poverty Law Center, is saying, quote, I think what we're starting to see now is people becoming more disheartened and disconnected from mainstream politics. He continues, we believe we can expect more violence as people become increasingly frustrated and unmoored. J.M. Berger, a supposed expert on extremism and research scholar at Vox Poll, said, quote, what we've seen in the Trump era is that a lot of people on the fringes see opportunities for political engagement where they didn't see it before. He continued, the question is, what happens when that window closes? Now, if you watch any of these Fed posty streams that are going on, you would find a narrative almost identical to the one painted in The Guardian. Trump supporters get pissed off and start advocating the murder of innocent people with no discernible goal. Jews and their Gentile dupes go to great lengths to paint these kinds of nonsense narratives, even as all evidence conspires to expose them as frauds. Yet here we are met with a group of anonymous actors sabotaging actual nationalists with reputations, repeating these exact narratives with no apparent concern about being doxxed, deplatformed, or prosecuted. Now, again, I mean, maybe these people are just really dumb and helping the by accident, but how lucky can the really be? In the course of my observations, I've concluded that these people create their own luck. Yet the problem here goes much deeper than the immediate concern about a few bad actors with botnets and sock accounts. We've had these subversives in our ranks the entire time, and it is impossible to fully measure the influence they've had over the culture and ideology of the movement. What I've illustrated here seems like obvious subversive activity, but how much less obvious subversion has been sown during this time? This whole entire mess stinks. One might make the case that it has set us back further than the Antifa violence and state repression combined. Recovering from it will be costly, time-consuming, and uncertain. But we have to do it because there's far too much at stake to forfeit the conflict. 3239 Agenda, if you would like to be on the no more you talk to less I have to. So please do give us a call. Let me see something here. See if this thing's still down. Are you still down there, Stream Not Me? Yep, sadly. Okay. 3239 Agenda if you would like to be on the show today. And I don't really, I kind of like, I almost like didn't even fucking do this today because I don't want to make this like, you drag these things on for too long and fucking people start getting annoyed with you, right? And I understand that, and I take that hazard very seriously, I assure you. But this was really irking me, right? Especially when you put it in the context of that optics debate. It's like, these guys come in here and they're like, okay, I know that I've been talking about women and but you guys better pull it the fuck together, right? A bunch of other guys say, hey, fuck you. We're going to post bowl cut memes and worship. You get on either side of that conflict, and it's like, oh, that's right. That's why I'm a white man. I'm supposed to fucking think for myself and not let other people make these decisions for me. 3239 Agenda, you'd like to be on the show tonight.